Boston and much of New England in a snow emergency as we come on. This is their third crippling storm in a matter of weeks.
This building nearby caving in.
Blizzard conditions. Stay off the road, stay off the streets and sidewalks, stay inside.
Tonight, the major blast of winter from coast to coast, plunging temperatures and a new storm threatening millions in the east.
Hey guys, welcome to the high ground. My name is Fabio, and during the last year and in the recent days, we saw news like this all over the network, and we should talk about it. Now in this video we will talk about how to prepare yourself and your home for a snowstorm. It is not meant to talk about wilderness preparation, because ideally you shouldn't be out in the wilderness if there is a snowstorm coming or already happening. The good thing with such severe weather events is that you will know at least 2 to 3 days in advance that they are coming. If you're surprised by a huge snowstorm, a blizzard, then you might not have paid enough attention to the weather forecast. Of course, the weather forecast isn't always right, but still they have a pretty good idea of the weather that is coming along your way, and you should have that idea as well. I'm from Switzerland, and we have quite some experience with huge amounts of snow, especially out in the mountains. Of course, we're not on the North Pole or in the Arctic, but well, we have a season change, and so we have to prepare for winter and heavy snow every year. Additionally, I lived out quite far in the backcountry for quite some time and had to take care of the preparations for bad weather and severe weather like the snowstorms we saw over the last year. I'm out in the mountains for quite a bit, and also there it is customary to support the hut wardens when they open up the huts or when they have to close for winter. So also from this side, with huts that are quite remote up in the mountains, I have my fair share of experience on how to prepare for those snow events. In case of a snowstorm, you will have the same survival needs as always. You need shelter, security, food and water. That's basically it. Let's talk about shelter first. Your shelter is your home. And I still believe that in a snowstorm, your home will likely be the most secure shelter, the most safe shelter you can find. So I would stay there. I wouldn't go out in the wild and try to survive in an igloo if you don't have to. So we will look at your home, at your house. First of all, I assume that your house will not be in a path where an avalanche would come along. If that is the case, generally the state, the government will lock your region down, will lock your house down, and you have to leave anyway. At least this is what happens here in Switzerland, and I would assume that it's the same in other countries. Assuming that you won't have an issue with avalanches, snow can still be a huge threat to the structural integrity of your house. Because even though it looks all fluffy, it can get pretty heavy when it lays on your roof. Houses in regions where you expect a lot of snow will be built differently than houses in warmer regions. So in terms of structural integrity, yes, this might include the load that the carrying walls will be able to bear, but it will also and especially be applicable for your roof. In regions with a lot of snow, roofs tend to have a steeper angle. I will show you a picture of this one. There you can see that's a house. It's pretty far up in the mountains, and you can see the roof is angled quite a bit. So that's done so that the snow will not stay on top of the roof, but will slide off. Of course, you have to be careful if you're out in the garden and you get the, so we call them roof avalanches, because they can hit you pretty hard. But on the other hand, of course, the load on the roof and therefore on the structure of your house is greatly diminished if the snow just slides off. Now, if you don't have a roof that, well, has a steep angle, or if you have a roof with an angle, but the snow, for whatever reason, is sticking to it, you have to make sure that even during the snowstorm, you're able to get out there and clean the snow off your roof. Most house owners will have to, well, go up to their roof anyway, but it will be different conditions if you have to do it during a snowstorm. You might need a rope to secure yourself. You have to be aware that it might be slippery. It might be in the night, so you need a good light, preferably a headlamp, because you want to have your hands free to work. You should make sure that you have all that available before the snowstorm hits so that you can go up there and clean it. If you live in a rental apartment, somebody is generally there who takes care of the house. Now, if that person doesn't live in the house or he isn't here, you can't rely on the person. Meaning that even if you only rent an apartment, before a severe weather event hits, you should make sure that you're aware not only on how to get to the roof and clean the snow, but also on all other things we will discuss a little bit later in this video. We made sure that the structural integrity of your house is up to the task of a snowstorm. What else would cause you to lose your shelter? Well, the classics: electricity, fire, water, gas. Let's talk about electricity first. In a widespread emergency, and widespread emergencies generally happen when regions that are not used to a lot of snow are hit by severe snowstorms. In such an emergency, it is likely that the power grid will go down. I'd say that's not the end of the world, because it will not actually cause you to lose your shelter. So I'd say if you're well prepared, electricity is one of the least things you should worry about. We talked about electricity. Now let's look at gas. Generally, your gas pipes shouldn't freeze, because gas that is delivered to your home should be so dry that there is not enough moisture in it to freeze. However, it is possible if you have old pipes or due to temperature fluctuations and condensation that there is a certain amount of moisture in the gas that reaches your house. Building codes generally require drip legs to get the moisture out of your gas system, out of your gas pipes within the house. Just make sure that those drip legs are working fine, and then you should be good even for a severe weather event. Still, you should always be aware how to turn off the gas for all of your house. Something that can render your shelter seriously inhabitable is water. Therefore, you should make sure that your water system in your house is up to the task. That depends on the insulation of your water pipes, because that insulation is generally meant to keep the water temperature above freezing, even if it is cold outside. But you should also consider if there might be parts of your water system that is electrically heated with an electrical heater, because when the power goes out, this heater might no longer work and eventually the pipe might burst. If you think that there is any issue with water in your house connected to freezing temperatures, then it might be a wise decision to turn the valves off and additionally drain all the pipes. You should have a drainage point in your house where you can actually drain all the water pipes. Of course, in this case, you have to make sure that you have at least enough water, drinking water initially. We will look at water a little bit later. Generally, that's not a big issue in a snowstorm. The last element that might threaten your shelter is fire. Now, is a fire likely in a snowstorm? Absolutely. You might have candles, you might have a gas stove. As we said, power lines might be taken down by the storm. That is all something that might cause a fire, even though if it snows outside. Generally, wet weather is not a protection against your house burning down. Now, how to prepare against a fire? Well, it's pretty easy. Get yourself a fire extinguisher. That's a small one, that's a 2-liter one, and you're generally good with that if you can get to the fire pretty early. This is a power fire extinguisher. It works against fire classes A, B, and C. Normally, in a normal household, you won't need a fire extinguisher that works against fire classes D, because they are generally flammable metals, and well, you usually don't have that stuff at home. For me, I'm also a firefighter, so I take a little bit more responsibility within our community here. I have the bigger fire extinguisher here. That's a 6-liter one. That's just because we live in a house with, well, a lot of people, and I don't assume that I will get to the fire early, and that will give me a little bit more leeway to extinguish the fire or to get people out of the house. But as said, a small fire extinguisher should be in every household, not only in the case of a snowstorm. I always get a little bit sick if I see that people have 10,000 rounds of ammunition, but not a single fire extinguisher in their house. I mean, maybe that's just me, but doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, a shelter is only a shelter if you can survive in it. So that means if you have a heating system, make sure that the heating system is self-reliant. Even if you have an oil heating system, or if you have a gas heater and you actually have the big oil tanks with you, it might be that it's still dependent on electricity. So make sure that you're aware how your heating system works. And if your heating system doesn't work self-reliant or independently, then make sure that you have warm clothes, that you have other possibilities to heat up your rooms to make sure that you can survive in your rooms, even if the electricity is out. Means to keep you and your family warm are, of course, blankets, warm clothes, space blankets. I mean, they're super small, but they retain a lot of heat if you use them. All this stuff. Candles, even if they are small, they're a good way to produce heat and actually to heat in small rooms. Close your doors between rooms, so gather in one room that you heat, that you warm up, or that you concentrate your heating efforts on. Don't spread throughout the whole house, etc. So these are all things you should consider when actually you're preparing for a snowstorm in your house. Now, after we talked about shelter, let's talk about security. With any natural disaster, it is possible that violence and crime increase. We saw that in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. That was a total catastrophe. You should be able to defend your house. Now, if you're in Germany, it might be harder to get a gun to defend your house than, for example, if you're in Montana or Texas, right? I don't want to get too political, but everybody has the right to defend himself, and just make sure that you have the means as good as possible available to you. Keep in mind that if you have a lot of snow, it will hinder the movement of a lot of people. That might include first responders, that might include also criminals, looters, etc. So people are a lot less mobile. I'm living out, well, in a smaller village in the countryside. We don't have a lot of crime here, so I wouldn't suspect that if we have 2 meters of snow overnight and the roads to the next city are basically closed and you can't get through, that there would be a spike in crime. On the other hand, if I would live in a bigger city, in a, well, crime-ridden area, and I would know that there won't be any first responder here for the next 2 days, I might be worried a little bit more and sleep even closer to my gun. Another thing that is connected to security for me is you should have your first aid package and a tourniquet. So get off my back because that is still closed. I have several open tourniquets here, but you should have something like that around because it will definitely take the ambulance, first responders, medics, etc. much longer to get to your house in case something happens. If there is a severe storm, helicopters might not be able to fly, so you should already have that stuff. But if not, then yeah, make sure that you stock up before such an event happens. Now let's briefly talk about food and water. Water shouldn't be too much of a problem because it falls from the sky in a snowstorm, but you will need means to melt it. Those means can obviously be the same means that you can use to cook food, but it can also be just your body heat, etc. Now, if I would assume that you will go into a snowstorm with a sufficient amount of drinking water. But you should start melting the snow before your supply of drinking water is actually emptied, because it's much easier to put snow and water into a containment and heats it up so that the snow melts, as than just putting snow into something and only heat the snow. It will go much quicker when you add a little bit of already molten water to the snow. That's just something out of experience. What could you use to, well, heaten up snow to melt water? The easiest thing is something I have here. It's just small candles. They're pretty handy. You can store them away. They hold forever. They cost almost nothing. And of course, they spend light, heat, etc. A little bit more sophisticated would be a cooker, something like that. That's a pretty basic one. It also doesn't take a lot of room and you can have it stored anywhere. Just make sure that you have sufficient amounts of gas, but we will talk about that in a second. The even better version of a cooker is something like this. You see, that's that's a bucket that is basically for 1 or 2 people, but you can store everything in there, and that's your cooker. Generally, well, it takes around 1 or 2 minutes to get the whole bucket of water boiling. It's much quicker in getting snow molten. So yeah, it's a really good thing to have this. And also if you're outdoors, I mean, it weighs something around 400 to 500 grams. And yeah, you can take it with you easily. It's small, good thing to have. All those pretty cookers don't help you if you don't have the sufficient amounts of gas. And I generally don't like the big gas bottles because I'm doing a lot of outdoor stuff and I can't take them with me. But I just have a box full of those cartridges, and one of these generally is sufficient for 9 liters of water if you want to melt it from snow. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, I have enough gas to melt roughly 100 liters of water. That gets me quite over some time, even if I have to also heat up water to prepare food. And it's, yeah, it does hardly take any space. It's, yeah, just a small box, right? So that's something I would recommend. It's good to have it at home. It's handy if you're an outdoor person anyway, so well, I'd go with that one. Now for food. Food shouldn't be a big issue. You should have, well, supplies in stock for a few days up to a few weeks anyway. Just keep in mind that as soon as the snowstorm is over, the supply chain might not be back up and running. So it might take a few days or even a few weeks until the shops actually open back up and you can get get food to buy, or you can get out to buy food. So that's something to keep in mind. Not only, well, if the weather forecast says that there will be a snowstorm for 3 days, then you might need more food than only for 3 days. The good side of a snowstorm is that even if the power goes out, you will be able to just use outside as a refrigerator. Again, depending on where you live, but you generally have some space that is outside and still protected from other people just taking stuff away. Last but not least, we talked about getting food after the snowstorm is over. Spend some thoughts on mobility. I myself, for example, even if there would be 2 meters of fresh snow out there, I could strap on my touring skis and get to the next town, get to friends or family. That wouldn't be an issue from our side, but keep in mind that you might have to make sure that you're mobile after the storm ends. If you feel confident enough that you can use backcountry ski, that's of course the faster solution to get from A to B. But keep in mind that you will not have access to search and rescue if there is actually a catastrophe. So if you're not sure about that, maybe just go with snowshoes. They're quite cheap, and have a pair of them, or also maybe a full set of them for your family available, so that you can actually get off the X after the snowstorm if it would be necessary. That should give you a baseline to be prepared for the next snowstorm in your area. We might make another video where we actually look about surviving a snowstorm in the mountains. That's a much more severe event than if you're sitting in your cozy home. If you liked this video, make sure to give us a thumbs up. It's one of those videos I intend to make more just based on current events, just looking what just happened and what can we talk about. And yeah, thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here. If you haven't done already, give us a follow, and I'd say I see you next time.